This is a talk called Art Basel's Crowdfunding Initiatives Focus Projects.
Hello. 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 Hello, Vadim. Sit down. Okay. So, good afternoon, good early evening, everyone. This is going to be a kind of like a speed dating panel because, there's 7 people and there's 1 hour. We're going to finish at 7 sharp. So I'm just going to quickly make the introductions and then I'll set things up. And we're here to talk about crowdfunding. So Mary Ceruti from the SculptureCenter, Aaron Cezar from Delfina Foundation, Chana Sheldon from Locust Project to my left, Stephanie Pereira from Kickstarter over there, Mari Spirito from Protocinema in Istanbul, who also curates the series, but you'll understand why she's here, and Glenn Phillips, who's acting head of the Department of Architecture and Contemporary Art at the Getty Research Institute in LA. Thank you. We can leave now. So thanks very much for coming. Probably the fact that you're sitting here means that you know that recently a new initiative was launched, a new collaboration was launched between Art Basel and Kickstarter, which has resulted in the Art Basel curated page on Kickstarter. This is a new strategic initiative. This morning we had a larger discussion about the future of arts funding and all the different ways in which the challenge of connecting capacity with need in the arts is shifting and gyrating in complicated and challenging ways. But we thought it would be particularly interesting this afternoon to have a conversation with organizations that have participated in this initiative, with the jurors who participated in this initiative, and with the sort of Kickstarter mastermind who can also help us explain how this all works. This collaboration grew out of the notion that the non-profit arts ecology that perhaps is not what you see here at this commercial art fair is the lifeblood of the art world. No artist, no gallery, no collector, no museum person who's here would be here if there wasn't this much wider world of often quite small, bootstrapped art initiatives which are non-profits and which, unlike many commercial galleries, are having just as tough of a time getting by and raising money for interesting initiatives. So it seemed like this would be a great way to combine 2 platforms. You've got Kickstarter, which is the world's leading crowdfunding platform, although Stephanie doesn't like us to call Kickstarter crowdfunding platform. But Art Basel is the world's leading art fair platform. And they've teamed up on behalf of, to connect the resources, the capacity, the networks, the amplification potential of Art Basel to make it as easy as possible to mount these initiatives. So October was the launch of the Art Basel Kickstarter curated page. Non-profit organizations are invited to run crowdfunding campaigns. Many are called, few are chosen, as they say. There's a professional jury. Mari and Glenn are 2 of the jurors, and I should also acknowledge Hamad Nazar, who is with the Asia Art Archive in Hong Kong, who couldn't be with us, but the 3 of them have been instrumental in looking at the proposals and making sure that the projects which make it onto the Kickstarter Art Basel curated page are really good ones. And that's probably one reason why 100% of the projects so far have met their targets. As you know, is everybody here familiar with the logic of Kickstarter, right? There's a target sum, and people pledge money in small increments from $1 up. And when enough money has come together to reach that target sum, it's released to the organizations. If they don't reach that target, then the money goes back to the people who made the pledges. So, so far there have been 8 campaigns. About $183,000 have been raised, and I should emphasize that this is the hard work of the organizations themselves, as they will tell you. And there have been about 1,000 backers so far who have contributed on average $190, which is interesting to note, 3 times the average of the Kickstarter average donation. So the reason we're here today is to sort of, having had this 6-week experience, for many of us this was a first experience, is to sort of figure out, and we sort of begun a conversation this morning about this. This is a tool, and like every tool, it has strengths, it has less so strengths, it has challenges, it requires one to learn new skills to use this tool, and we sort of want to grapple with that and what it means, also as a way of letting all of you know that this is something that's happening and to spread the word about this remarkable opportunity. So what I'd like to do is sort of go around and ask each of you sort of what you learned. We're not here to sort of give you a detailed overview of the projects because there's no time, but we're more interested in how has this made you think differently about the challenge of raising money or reaching out to your constituents. And we've all learned from this, so our jurors and even Stephanie, I'm sure, has learned something in this process, hopefully. So I'll start with Chana. You are the head of Locust Projects, which is a Miami-based nonprofit dedicated to providing contemporary visual artists the freedom to experiment. You did a wonderful, you came from the commercial sector from Casey Kaplan Gallery. You did the Daniel Arsham installation, which you celebrated just yesterday at a big party. They reached 163% of their goal, so they've been this poster child of this initiative. So what have you learned?
So for us, this opportunity has been a tremendous success and eye-opening experience. We exceeded our goal of $7,500 with a final amount of over $12,000, and the outreach was incredible. We took this opportunity and presented Daniel Arsham's exhibition, and it was an ambitious project, something that was going to be a challenge for the artist and also a big homecoming for him from Miami, him being a Miami native and coming back during this very exciting week to present the project. It was also something that, you know, we kind of didn't know what we were getting into. And when we started, what became clear and something that we didn't really expect was that Kickstarter was almost a mirror for a platform of who we are as an organization. We've always seen ourselves as a place, first and foremost, to support the production of new work. But we've also always been about community and accessibility. We're a space that was founded by artists for artists, and the community aspect of the organization is what sustained us over this last 17 years. So throughout the process, being the director of an organization that's kind of always looking for innovative ways to fundraise for the ever-growing ambition of the artists that are coming to us, this has been a very effective tool.
And what surprised you the most about the whole thing?
Oh, I would say that one of the beautiful things that happened is that we got donations of $1 or $2,000, and one note that we got from a $5 donor said something like, "I'm broke, but I really wanted to support what you're doing," and that meant a lot to us. I mean, that's what we're all in it for.
Great. Mary, I should say, Mary and I, we go way back. You know, she runs the SculptureCenter, which is one of the most esteemed old school, in a way, nonprofits in New York. There's the Drawing Center, the SculptureCenter. It's in Long Island City. Everybody in this room should visit it. They've just recently opened a wonderful extension, and it was in conjunction with this reopening, and maybe this was not a good idea, but you were also doing your crowdfunding campaign, which had a goal of $12,000. About Mary, she spent a big part of her career on the West Coast before. Now it's been quite a few years.
15 years already.
15 years at SculptureCenter. It's one of the most innovative curatorial programs and independent curatorial programs in New York City. So for you, And as you can see, I'm avoiding pronouncing the name of the artist because I will leave that to you. Tell us a little bit about the experience.
Well, I said to Mary before we started that I don't know if I would be able to pronounce her name if I didn't have to do it on the Kickstarter video. I really had to learn it if I was going to be on camera doing it. So I spent a long time. That was maybe the biggest challenge of the whole project.
So let's hear it.
Her name is Arya Razdomransuk, which she probably says it completely differently, but she's approved that pronunciation.
What did you learn?
What did we learn? I guess, we had flirted with the idea of doing a Kickstarter for various projects over the last, say, 2 or 3 years. And different people came to me and said, you should be doing Kickstarter. You should try this. And I think, you're right that it does feel like it's something that is in the field now. It's a method of raising money that we need to figure out how it's going to or not, how it's going to work for us towards what ends and where to apply that tool. So I think what we learned, because it was a struggle for us. It was a lot of work, and it was at a moment we had a lot of other things going on. We were trying to finish a capital campaign, opening a new building. There was a lot happening, doing a gala.
They have a great gala.
So it was like one other way we were trying to raise money. And there was that moment where I thought, somebody came up to me and said, every email I get from you is asking for some other way to give money. And I was like, ooh, yeah, we don't want, especially because we had so much great stuff going on at the same time that wasn't about raising money, just like come see the new building, we have a great show up. We didn't want all of our communication to be about that. But I think, what it did do, because Arya is an artist who's not well known in the United States or in Europe particularly. The work is amazing and so deserving of this retrospective. But we had been talking actually since the beginning of the calendar year about how to create a context for people to understand the significance of this retrospective. Because she's not known, you want to make sure that people understand that this is actually a really major show that they need to see. And because they don't know who she is, they can't pronounce her name, in a way, the Kickstarter was a way of getting the word out in advance about the show. And that might be the most valuable thing. It's not so much about the dollars that are supporting the project. I mean, specifically, the Kickstarter campaign was funding retitling and remastering some of the older videos and creating a new sort of framework for displaying some of the video. But I think in the end, a lot of it is about the visibility that we gained.
So maybe if you could quantify that somehow. I mean, I know that theoretically, this is not a large amount of money. You have several board members who, at least theoretically, could sign this check for you and you would have been done. But what about some numbers about, like, how many people did you reach through this that you wouldn't have reached otherwise?
Well, it's hard to know if we wouldn't have reached them otherwise. It's like these are questions. It's hard to evaluate some of it, but as far as the numbers go, we had, I think it was 119 donors. 82% of those people had never given us money before. 40% of them have never been to SculptureCenter. So, that, with those numbers, that sounds pretty great.
So that sort of opens up a relationship, perhaps. I mean, the question
That's the question. Is it a relationship or is it a transaction? We don't know yet.
We don't know.
We hope that they come to the show. And
at what point does a transaction become a relationship?
That's sort of the question. I think one of the things that that added to the work is like you can't then communicate and ask those donors to join your mailing list through Kickstarter, so you have to like get them.
Right.
It's sort of circuitous in terms of developing that relationship, which is if that were more streamlined, that would be helpful to us as organizations. But I also understand why Kickstarter does have that kind of wall. What? I'm sorry?
No, I'm sorry. You can, absolutely. When you send the survey out to collect information for the rewards, you can say, this has been great. Here's this. Would you like to join our mailing list? If so, put your email here.
Maybe I misunderstood this, because I didn't manage that part of the campaign, so I may have a misunderstanding about that, but I know that was a little bit of an issue. But I think that question about the relationship, we'll know, do they come to the show?
Yeah.
Like, that would be my first question, is do they actually show up for the show?
Well, I know everything you're saying is music to Stephanie's ears, because her mantra is that this is an awareness-raising platform. It's an awareness-raising platform. We'll keep going, and everybody should feel free to jump in. That's cool. It's all in the spirit of crowd conversing. But, Aaron, I remember sitting with you last summer in the... Who's aware of the Delfina Foundation in London? It is an absolute... It's like an oasis of tranquility, steps from the Buckingham Palace. Wonderful residency program, great building. And I remember the beginnings of the thought process for you about how to do this. But before that, I should say that Aaron is one of these incredibly impressive people who's everywhere in the art world, on every board, degrees in economics, dance, and creative industries. And he's really been instrumental in raising the profile of Delfina Foundation internationally. And actually with you guys, there was quite a lot of back and forth evolving your exhibition on performance in the Arab world. Talk about that, but it did reach 114% of its $27,000 target. So what did you learn?
Well, I think the thing that I learned the most was that the Kickstarter campaign wasn't just about raising money and raising awareness, but also cultivating a community of people of thought who could also contribute ideas towards our research. So our project was very much to develop an open research project to tell the history of performance art from the Arab world. It's a very unrecorded history. So what came forth from us, we immediately sent out information about the Kickstarter campaign, was ideas of archives in the Middle East, of key influential people who wrote dissertations and papers, as much as it was also picked up by the press itself, which then also then further heightened the whole profile of the project. So it came at a very great time for us because we were very much trying to canvas out who were the key authority figures and key points of information about this project. So we very much saw this project as a large kind of communication tool for Delfina Foundation, as much as it was about short-term fundraising and building that into a long-term sustainability plan. So we very much thought about how we begin to go out to our community now and ask for support. We previously hadn't really done that. You could come to Delfina Foundation, everything was free, the food, the drinks, the conversation, the exhibitions, but we never asked our supporters or audiences to return kind of the favor, as it were. So going out, we actually found it relatively easy to do that. And in fact, many of them said to them, well, you hadn't asked me before, I'm so happy to contribute to this. Now, our project had a very specific audience, which was the Arab world, really. But what we found very touching was that our community at large responded to the project. It wasn't just our Arab audiences that we have cultivated over 7 years, but many kind of British, American, people who had not been to Delfina Foundation before also contributed to the project. But those who did know us, it was, again, this kind of small kind of sign of support, of giving £1, like you were saying about giving $1, just to say, actually, I support you, and I think what you're doing is great. And so now the trick, of course, as you're saying, Mary, is how we turn this into long-term sustainability for the organization, which we're exploring now.
We'll keep going. And I think we'll go to Mari. So the jurors in this project have been really more than just jurors. I mean, you were sort of along for the ride starting earlier this summer, and have been very much part of the process, and in some cases in close dialogue with some of the organizations. I mean, Mari is herself a very established curator and potential recipient or crowdfunding protagonist. So watching your colleagues grapple with this, what did you learn about all this process? What surprised you?
Right, making those gifts to give back to people, silkscreen T-shirts and getting mugs made and so forth. I learned that the issue of a lack of government funding for art, not only in the United States but everywhere, it's getting bigger and stronger, and even like the issue we were taking today about how in some parts of the world what is a not-profit doesn't look like a non-profit in our culture is wildly different. And then one thing that seems interesting is I'm talking about the issue of lack of support for culture and art specifically more and more now because of this Art Basel crowdfunding initiative. And other ideas are coming up and ways to make this one better, and that it is more of an issue, and putting light on the issue has been like the big learning thing for me.
And as you talk now to other groups, what do you warn them about? What is it that you tell them, you better watch out because this is going to be tough?
Doing the Kickstarter fundraising campaign, I have a not-for-profit that's about 3.5 years old. I haven't done one yet because I know it's an excruciating large amount of work. But that said, this particular context of this collaboration with Art Basel creates a huge amount of exposure and dialogue, and it's as much about getting the word out about your organization and what it's doing as it is raising that actual money, and that will create other opportunities for other fundraising. And when you're aligned with these different kind of institutions, then it also makes it easier for you to get funding from other places that you've accomplished this.
Can I just interrupt and say, right now it's really, really hard as smaller institutions to raise money. So the more visibility you can get for yourself, for your brand, for your ideas, for your projects, it's really incredibly important. So that's what the Art Basel crowdfunding initiative is allowing us to do, is to get more visibility for what we do.
Right. And actually, one of the interesting things that came up in the process, and correct me, Stephanie, if I'm wrong, that there had not been previously cultural crowdfunding projects that have received external PR support the way that Art Basel injected this additional media echo
not
around
in a formalized way. No, not like this.
So that's been a real upside in some cases. There's been very impressive media coverage of this.
The numbers are staggering. When we were in that meeting and you were saying it's getting this many million hits on all these different media outlets, it's unbelievable.
190 million Twitter, whatever that means, but it sounded great.
And so just like in the same way that if you're applying for like a Ford Foundation or Andy Warhol, and you can say like, I've got these other grants, it's better for your credibility, that hopefully this is going to do the same thing, that you achieve this fundraising campaign, then okay, and you've gotten all this exposure, then okay, we're going to believe in you and give you more money in the future as well from other organizations.
So Glenn, you're sitting in one of the world's great cultural institutions, also one of the world's wealthiest, or certainly formerly one of the world's wealthiest institutions, but still a very wealthy one. So everybody else here, compared to the Getty, is working in peanut-sized organizations. So what's your view on all of this? And do you see institutions as big as the Getty one day doing this kind of thing?
Well, the Getty has a foundation that gives grants to, organizations of all size, but, maybe that tends to usually be a little bit more established organizations. But, if you think about, I would imagine probably every single artist who's showing in a booth at Art Basel could name a small nonprofit that has been very important to them in their career. Giving them an early exhibition, giving them support at a crucial time. And, small nonprofits are really kind of the lifeblood and so often like an important starting point or mid-career point for everyone. And so I came into this project specifically because of the opportunity to give a little bit of a boost maybe to other organizations. And I came in really just sort of thinking about that angle. And as everyone has said, what I've learned since then is it's so much more about the information sharing and the exposure. And I'd like to think that I know a lot about organizations that are around the world, but I've learned about a lot of new organizations myself that I didn't know about through this. And it's been interesting for me, like a lot of people, for me the sign that the information is really out there is how often people are just stopping me and asking me about this and wanting to know more. And sometimes it's about the initiative, but sometimes it's like, no, I want to know about that exhibition they're doing. Like, I didn't know about that. Can you know, what do you know more about it? And so it's kind of great. You know, we can wander the halls here and virtually visit galleries in every city, but there's not an equivalent where you can virtually visit these great nonprofits that are all over the world. So to have another way that that information can get out there for people has become really one of the major benefits, I think.
So, but you didn't answer the question about the Getty. Do you think that large institutions might undertake this? Or under what circumstances would they?
I think one of the Smithsonian's did.
Yeah.
I learned from Ben Wine, who's my associate director. He did a little research. The Smithsonian did one for a yoga exhibition that raised $150,000.
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak for the Getty, but I think, you know, the Getty is a philanthropic organization, so I doubt that we would see it as appropriate to do this sort of campaign. But I think certainly, well, you know, here's what I've learned. Every institution that I've spoken to about this project, no matter what their size, everyone has always said, you know, we've like debated Kickstarter. We've really been thinking about it. You know, and a lot of places have just kind of needed maybe one more little push or incentive to decide to just do it. And that's not just small organizations that I've spoken to. That's even larger organizations who, I think everyone is looking everywhere for, you know, alternative ways to engage, alternative ways to raise support, to raise awareness, and to raise funding, and other types of support.
So, Stephanie, you've heard now several themes have been laid out on the table. At some moments I saw you nodding, and at some points I saw you maybe shaking your head a little bit. So, what have you learned in all this?
What have I learned from all this?
By the way, Stephanie comes from the world of nonprofit art. She has perfect bona fides as a nonprofit arts manager. She's now with Kickstarter.
I'm qualified to speak here.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's actually, if you wouldn't mind, can I twist your question a little bit? I mean, I would like to just sort of pull out a few of the things that I've heard that are mistakes that I think people make commonly, and that I think that I'm hearing or people like learned from their experiences. One is the preparation, and I think there's a couple different ways we've heard people talk about this. One is just understanding the level of work that goes into it. I think what we heard a little bit about prepping your community ahead of time, so being good to your community, understanding who those people are, how to reach them, what their interests are, so that when you send that email out, you're not just saying, hey, I need some cash, but you're saying, we're doing this exciting thing, and knowing that they're going to be excited about it, and what kind of maybe surprising you and sending you research and other resources back at you, so that you can get the most out of the experience. And then I think, Mary, what you were saying on the flip side is that being prepared when the project is over, to not just say, okay, we made our goal, it's over, but really thinking about, all right, we just did all that work. How do we now take these people who are part of this and nurturing them into a community and not just a one-time transaction? I think that those two things are so important, and hearing these folks talk about that and understanding that is really great.
I don't know the statistics at Kickstarter, but is this new pipeline of art projects actually sort of increasing the number of strictly visual arts projects that are happening in Kickstarter in a noticeable way?
So art is one of the largest categories on the site in terms of number of projects. It always has been. I think for us, what's been incredibly exciting is just the caliber of work. I mean, I can't tell you how much pride I have when I talk about the projects that you guys are working on. It's very easy for me to tell everyone about your projects when they're live, to say to folks, hey, SculptureCenter is bringing a Thai artist to the States for the first time ever to do a major retrospective. That's super easy for me to email everyone I know about and feel incredible pride that that's on Kickstarter. Same with all of your organizations. So I think that that is easily true, is that the level of work is really good for us.
So, excuse me, just checking, who has questions? Because I will leave time accordingly. Okay, okay. So lots of themes have come up, and Stephanie's done a nice job summarizing some of it. earlier today, Dennis Scholl was here when we talked in larger ways about arts funding. And he said, you know, the thing about these crowdfunding campaigns that people don't realize is that you go to war. It's like a 30-day campaign, and it takes a lot. And I don't want to frighten anybody. We've been sort of emphasizing that. But there's no doubt that it's something that requires a lot of organizational capacity and creativity to do. So with that in mind, based on your experiences, what do you think, when is it worth it? Or what kind of projects are really the best types of projects that make it worthwhile to go to war with this kind of campaign?
I was just going to say, I think it's something that is pioneering. That's something you can say, this has not been done before. Without your support, we cannot make this happen. And that was the case with our project in particular. But we had a lot of conversation. I remember I had a conversation with Stephanie and actually with András as well about the kind of project that we should perhaps put forward. And there is a limitation as well of crowdfunding too at the same time. It isn't a replacement for core funding. There's certain kinds of projects that may be too open in terms of research, some residencies that may not have a formal outcome, that may not be appropriate to put on Kickstarter, because then what do you offer in terms of a reward? Now at Delfina Foundation, we did find a way of incorporating all of that into one batch and offering experiences to our backers for rewards. So come and meet the artists, come have a studio visit, have a lunch with them, which very much fit our ethos as an organization. So I think it's important to actually know who you are as an organization and what you're able to actually give back to your community, and to not do things that are beyond your capacity, and because they may expect more of that, and therefore you then divert yourself, start doing limited edition prints or coffee mugs or all these sorts of things that you may not have been doing before, as was our case. Okay, so that was one. Yeah, Mary?
Well, similar to that, I would say, and this isn't exactly what we did, but I think the project that, if I were ever to do it again, I think it would be around a project that was outside of our normal practice, as Aaron said, and that had an audience that was beyond our usual audience too. Because I think, for this is actually, Arya's project actually was a good example of the kind of projects we do, which is bring in under-recognized artists and expose them to a fairly informed contemporary art audience. I think I would be inclined to, if I were going to do it again, to think about a project that was maybe out in the community, something more broad-based in its appeal, that was trying to expand our audience at the same time as the donor base, so that it goes on. The other thing about I just wanted to say about this idea of going to war. I don't know if I would quite use that analogy, but I felt like it was high pressure because it's public. Usually you go to raise money for a project and nobody really knows whether you made your goal or not, except your board and the artist maybe. And you can reduce the scale if you don't meet your goal or whatever. In this case, it was this all or nothing public situation where a PR firm was actually telling everybody that you were doing it. So, I remember we had a staff meeting, and here we were doing a capital campaign and trying to do a gala that was going to raise several $100,000. And all we were talking about was how we were going to do the Kickstarter and what was our next move. And one of the staff was like, "Can I just ask why we're focusing on a $12,000 campaign instead of the gala?" And I was like, well, because it would be so embarrassing to not be successful. It's sort of, I kind of thought this is how artists feel when their work goes up to auction. It's just so, there's a lot of exposure that goes with it, which is what it makes it extra stressful.
And of course, as a sector, we're not really used to conducting our business
exactly.
in public.
I have to say that exactly that point was something that we used to our advantage. Our core supporters were so aware of the publicity that we were getting, especially being that we had this opportunity around the big fair and everybody coming to town, and could use that as one of our perks, these VIP events to actually see the exhibition. But we found that our core constituents that have really been part of our community were our first funders. They really wanted to see us succeed, and it was because of their initial donations that it really picked up speed for us and kept it going.
So I think it's very clear from the feedback and certainly watching the projects, I completely agree with your point that both of your points, actually all of you said this, that the best type of project is not your basic pipeline of exhibitions and core programming or core staffing. Does that mean that we should be a little worried about the potential of crowdfunding in terms of long-term sustainability of our field? I mean, if it's really only suited to things around the edges, then can it also help solve the day-to-day need to keep a roof over your head and keep a staff going? Or do you see this as an evolution, perhaps?
I'll just quickly say, I think that it's a danger if politicians and art councils begin to think of crowdfunding as a replacement, and therefore they start to reduce funds that they give out to organizations. That's then a danger. But I also wanted to kind of pick up on your point. I just want to go back so slightly about going at war. It also can be really fun. You can actually make the campaigns really fun. So when we did tweets about people who gave money, we did really comic tweets. Or personal ones, we knew the person who gave money. It can be super fun. It doesn't have to be this who's laborious task. It depends on how you take it on as an organization. That's not going back to your point about crowdfunding and the fears around it. I think for us, we very much see it as this cultivation tool. So, I think it is possible to turn some of these people into regular givers. It just takes time and more effort. But that can also be done in a fun way.
And how often do you see yourselves doing it? I mean, you sounded, Mary, quite hesitant, but for the others, how often can you go back to this particular form of fundraising, or is it something that can become part of the sort of annual staple, the annual cycle of fundraising? We have our gala, we have our annual crowdfunding campaign. How do you see it fitting into the mix in the future?
I can speak to our experience as an organization. We've participated in some online fundraising opportunities before, and it's been more based locally. And they haven't been, it's really that PR push that we got around it that really helped. But it was a tremendous amount of work, so not sure how quickly we would do that again.
The others are dodging the question. Yeah?
It's not that I would never do it. I think we would really have to assess kind of what was right and like what we did right, what we needed, what we learned, and then if the right project came along, I would do it. I don't know that it would become an annual thing necessarily, but it could be if the right project came along. I think then, and you're in a position to prep for it, as you said. It's like you have to be able to lay the groundwork. So it was this was definitely a big learning experience, and I think we're all on a learning curve, like collectively around that. I think we do have to, there's no free money. Like you work hard to raise money no matter what you're doing. Like it takes work in whatever format you do it in. This seemed like more work because it was new work, And I think that, maybe at some point it doesn't feel so, we get, our skills get better at it, and then it doesn't seem so like such a big process.
I think a lot of the projects that the jury has really responded to have been projects that feel special in a way, that there is something that is unique about them, or maybe a little more ambitious or a little more unusual in the focus, or sometimes slightly infrastructural, like if you're sort of building out a residency or building out a website. And I think that has also been part of the appeal, that people can really feel like they're helping with something that's special. And I think that for me is a lot of the appeal of crowdfunding right now. It's not just another annual campaign, but it's an opportunity that is not a recurring opportunity. Doesn't mean that there, special things happen all the time, but to me it feels more interesting when it's a little less regularized, I guess.
Another, maybe to add to that, is I think in the Art Basel context, it also allows new types of connections to be made. A good example, perhaps, is the National Gallery of the Bahamas, which is now currently running a campaign with a very ambitious goal of $50,000. And I can see the representatives of the Davidoff Art Initiative are here, which I can announce just made a pledge of $3,000 towards that campaign. So having a platform allows you to begin to cross these kind of wires in new ways, often to institutions which have had no opportunity to fundraise in the past. And Amanda Colson, who's sitting there nodding her head, she's the orange figure there. I think she said, some of her visitors who were asked to pledge online asked her, what line? So it's a very interesting world where you have an organization that on the one hand can tap into a global corporate philanthropy, but actually on the ground may have a constituency that doesn't even have an internet connection. So we're clearly all feeling our way. At this point, I just want to ask about questions, because there were 2 hands in the air. Maybe those people have left, maybe not. Okay, so could you just say who you are, and if you have an affiliation, you don't have to, but it helps.
Hi, my name is Alia Fatou. I'm director at Lombard Fried Gallery. I had a question for Stephanie. I was wondering if you have come across examples other than these projects where there's a recurring campaigns, and what the pattern is for sustainable. Have there been other?
Yeah, sure. I'm glad you asked that. There are quite a few, at least to my knowledge, probably much more than that, organizations who use the site over and over and over again. Maybe it could be annually, in an annual campaign sort of way, but what's really interesting is that they've sort of, after that initial learning pains first time around, they said, this is what it's good for, this is not what it's good for. And for instance, there's an organization in Brooklyn called Invisible Dog that just ran its 3rd campaign. At this point, their community looks forward to their annual Kickstarter campaign. The rewards they create as part of that experience are things that people are excited about. It's the opportunity to get your name on their wall for the entire year for a $25 pledge. So it's a way to sort of literally write your name on the wall and say, I support and care about this organization. There's a small group out of LA who publishes, they solely do their publishing using Kickstarter. So every time they have a new edition they want to create, it's basically like back this project, get the publication. And I think most notably, not in the art world, but still a nonprofit, and I think something all of us here can learn from the podcast world. There's a man named Roman Mars who a few years ago did a project. Basically, he's like, guys, I've been making this podcast out of my garage all by myself. I want to make it real. Pledge and make this happen. He raised over $100,000. He came back again last year and raised over $400,000. And through one of the stretch goals, which is when you exceed your goal and you have an opportunity to sort of do a rallying cry, he launched a podcast network called Radiotopia. 6 months later, Roman, the same guy, said, guys, you made Radiotopia happen. Now let's revolutionize the podcasting industry. And they just finished a campaign for over $600,000. So with over 20,000 backers participating in the project. So as far as building a community for them, one of the huge goals of their final hurrah was, they called it like a friend raiser. They said, we want to build our audience through this channel. So I think those are all really solid examples.
And certainly those are the questions, I think, for the art world, is whether our world can scale. Because certainly the investment of effort and time for $400,000 is well worth it. It may not be worth it for $12,000.
Yeah.
And that's one of the questions I think looming over.
That's why I bring it up, even though it's outside our context, to help people sort of understand that it's not usual. Most people don't raise that level of money, but I think it can be done. And I think podcasts, it's something near and dear to my heart in that it's a huge part of culture. It's something that people usually consume for free. And here people are once, twice, 3 times giving their money to make these things happen. And it is around these calls to action. It is around saying, I believe in this. I believe in what you're doing. I appreciate all the things you've given me over the past year, and I want to give back. So I think that there's something really great there that all of us can learn from.
There was another question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Barabo. I'm the development manager at Prospect New Orleans. As someone in development, Kickstarter has always been a little frightening for me because you can't plan your annual budget around it, and it's all or nothing. And so my question for Stephanie is if Kickstarter has any plans to change that policy, or what Art Basel is doing to assure organizations who sign up for it that there are how this plays into their project budgets and how to be smart about using it.
So the all or nothing funding model is something we launched with and will never change because it is almost core to our DNA. It is an incredibly powerful and effective tool for actually reaching a funding goal. So the way it works is, as András sort of laid out earlier, you set a funding goal, you give yourself usually about 30 days to reach it. Most projects, if they launch and reach just 30% of that goal, even 20% of that goal, they're not very likely to let that money go. They're going to be having these like war room meetings when they're supposed to be planning a gala and saying, how do we make this happen? I mean, that's the reality. You will achieve that goal. We think, and I come from the nonprofit world, and I can't tell you how many times I wrote grants for a $20,000 program and was given like, well, we really like what you're doing, but we only have $10,000 to give you. So that's not going to happen on Kickstarter. If it's going to cost you $20,000 to do that thing, we want you to get the $20,000. We want you to be able to pull it off and fulfill on all the promises you made to your backers. That said, as a nonprofit, as an organization with an existing community around you, you have an incredible opportunity with that preparation going into it. So you know, all right, I have to achieve this goal. How are we going to reach it? How many people are on my mailing list? How much money on average do we think we're going to give? Maybe I have some board members or some people in my community, patrons who I know are passionate about this, who I can call on at a time to say, hey, can you pitch in this extra money? Maybe I could craft rewards specifically with those people in mind and say, I created this $2,000, whatever for you. Would you be a part of it? I used to work at a nonprofit that did a Kickstarter project, and that's exactly something that we did. We had a board member who said, if you can hit 15K just through individual gifts on your Kickstarter project, I will kick in 10K, which was amazing because this was a board member who really hadn't given beyond his give or get in like 10 years. So it was a moment for him to say, all right, if you guys can pony up, like I will make it happen. So I would say the most important thing is just to go into it with planning and to also understand that your network can be super powerful in a moment, not just in I launched a campaign, come be a part of it, but really as part of that planning process.
And can I just add, I think you have to see it as a portfolio of options to you as well. So our research project, which will become an exhibition, from Kickstarter we raised 1/3 of the funds that we actually need for it. And that was actually to kickstart the project, to actually begin it. Once we had the Kickstarter funds in place, we had an agreement with the venue and with the festival to co-commission the exhibition. And then the third bid came from business sponsorship, which actually partly came through from the visibility of the campaign. They came forward and said, actually, we would consider actually supporting you with £10,000. And that's the Mariah Arts Centre in Sharjah. And so they'll then take the exhibition to Sharjah after London. So actually, it was a fantastic campaign for us.
Our time is coming to an end. I want to encourage everybody to visit the Art Basel Kickstarter page, which is at, Stephanie, what's the address?
Kickstarter.com/Art Basel.
There you go. It has currently, I think, 4 active campaigns. Also, is Jessica Hoden here? She's waving her hand. She is the manager of this initiative and deserves a special round of applause. Any questions you don't feel have been answered here, she has the answers in terms of also the process. And this, I should probably also stress that even with the impressive numbers I cited earlier, $180,000, blah, 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 this is the beginning of a longer story and an experiment. But I think that the early indication is that, that a space has opened up where nonprofits can generate more capacity and attention to them. So in final closing, I want to now just challenge each of our speakers, because as many of you know, I like always to leave these panels with something very practical. So I want to start other end of the table coming this way. Just give us, for those of you, because almost everybody here is connected to some organization, my guess is that's why you're here, one piece of advice that if anybody's planning to do that we haven't heard, that they should make sure to follow if they're considering doing a crowdfunding campaign.
All right, great, thanks. From my position as a juror, we're looking for things that are hard to get funding otherwise. So talk programs, installations, books, the things that are more abstract that are essential to supporting artists. This is what's really important.
We talked about preparation. The majority of funds on a Kickstarter project usually comes from your own network. So these might not be people who have given you money before, but they're usually somewhere in your network. With that in mind, know that when you're planning your campaign, you can figure out who are these people, how do I reach them, what are they going to be excited about, how much money do I think they're going to pledge, who are my $5 backers, who are my $10, who are my $10,000 backers, and really build a plan with those specific people in mind. This is why we don't call it crowdfunding. It is not a crowd. It is really a community of people. You know who they are and you know how to reach them. So plan with them in mind.
Glenn.
I would say, you know, kind of a similar piece of advice, both for institutions that are thinking of doing a campaign and also people that are thinking of giving to a campaign. The rewards are awesome for arts organizations. I mean, you know, there have been great opportunities to get prints or small multiples or publications or experiences, contact with artists that are kind of fantastic and, you know, really great for the amount of money that they cost. And so I think rewards are very important for a successful campaign in both directions.
I feel like it's hard to say one thing. I guess I've said some of it already. Rewards, agreed. Like we brought in new rewards as the campaign went on, which changed, you know, sort of who we were reaching and how that happened. And I think rather than repeating some of the other stuff, I guess I would also say timing. Like for us, it was about
don't do it during the gala.
Well, it was about timing, but the other thing is actually to think about who's on the team, because I think this whole issue of it's really hard for development people to do this campaign because it runs against sort of the way they're trained, and so they're resistant, and it doesn't feel right to them. Whereas the visitor services guy who's 24 actually has better, like, it's more natural for him, and he can come up with different ideas. And I think, so like who you bring into the team to think about the structure and the planning of the campaign actually has to be different than how you would plan your annual fund or something.
Perfect. The point was made this morning as well. Yeah, give it to the 24-year-olds. Yes.
Don't be afraid of failure. I mean, we're all talking about success, but actually some campaigns do fail. And I think failure can be a very productive space to actually think about how to be successful.
I would say to inform your community, the people that know you and get you and want to see you succeed leading up to launching the project.
Earlier today, somebody mentioned, actually you mentioned joy and happiness, and I closed the conversation this morning also saying there's no greater joy than giving money to the arts. So I hope that all of you will go on the Kickstarter page and pledge today to the active projects, including Amanda's, and make the world a better place. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your night.